Hello, Assalamu alaikum everybody. Hope you're all safe, sound, and healthy. And I'm back. And I just realized after I had already uploaded my latest podcast, um, and then I kind of put it on YouTube, and then I decided to check to see if everything was fine. And then I found out that there were so many places where the mic was suddenly not working. And yet, you know what? When I kind of checked the original um, recording, they in those same places the mic wasn't working, but when I dragged it forward and then dragged it behind, then suddenly the vocals were back. So I don't know what's going on. All I know is that a good 42 minutes, although I was thinking I would just complete 10 minutes and then try to join the other 40 minutes, but I'm not sure what's going on, so I think I'll have to do the whole caboodle all over again. So I'm very sorry for that. The point that actually up till now so many people have actually listened to it, but nobody came out and reached out to me and told me that hey, there's a whole chunk missing. So let's begin again. The whole problem here is something's wrong with India. Okay, so what's wrong with India? The problem here with India is the people all around the world are getting annoyed with Indians and with India for various reasons. But one of the most important reasons that we Pakistanis especially are getting annoyed with India is that India is literally behaving like Israel. In fact, if anything, India is in many ways already the Israel of Asia or the America of Asia, but now they have gone up and decided to become more Israel than America. Because, like how Israel keeps on and on stealing credits and stealing history from Palestine and claiming it to be theirs, including dishes, Palestinian dishes known for centuries, and Israeli suddenly say, oh, these are ours. Like, seriously? You're literally lying to our faces in front of us. Talk about shamelessness. But unfortunately, this is the exact thing that Indians are doing when it comes to, for example, I think the very first thing that we need to note is how India suddenly decided to claim that they invented the zero. Now, this is a very tall claim and a false claim at that. And I'll tell you why. Because the concept of zero and its use as a placeholder, this actually originated in Mesopotamia. Okay, and these are the Sumerians of Mesopotamia, and then later the Babylonians. Okay, so the Sumerians, they initially used spaces, as in, they just used spaces to indicate the absence of a number in their positional number system, and that was, basically denoting zero. The Babylonians, they developed a specific symbol, which is the two angled wedges to represent this concept, again, the concept of zero, right? Now, the Sumerians, we're talking about almost 5,000 years ago. Okay, we're talking about um, 3000 BCE, if I'm right. Okay, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm doing this podcast all over again, so it's off the top of my head, okay? So yeah, so the Sumerians are basically 5,000 years old, their whole concept of zero. And then the Babylonians were basically working on the same concept of the Sumerians. It's like they were just developing that concept further. And this is around 300 BCE again. So the Babylonians were amongst the first to use a symbol, as we know, to represent the value of zero. Okay, and then later on, obviously, the Mayans too, by the way, the Mayans too used zero. So, what did India do? India basically, just an Indian mathematician came up and said, oh, you know what? Let's formalize the use of zero. And when was this? In 628 CE. When? 628 CE. Okay. So, the concept of zero that was already there, that was already played with, that the Babylonians actually used in their complex calendar system. So it was already there. All the Indian mathematician did was, oh, you know what? Let's add the figure zero in decimals, and let's use it formally. Okay, so that's what India gets credit for. Okay, so yeah, the first evidence we have of zero is from the Sumerian culture, which was in Mesopotamia some 5,000 years ago. And then you had the Babylonians who were working on the very same concept, and they just decided to develop it a little more. And then the Indians who decided to put it in math and give it that figurative zero, shunya, that we know. Okay, So Indians did not invent zero. No, all they did was formalize the use of zero. There's a huge difference there. Okay, a huge difference there. Thank you very much. Because the use of zero was again already there. Okay, they just formalized it in math. So here we have it. Then now we come to um, the problem here that Pakistanis are having with Indians is that Indians have also for a very long time tried to claim a lot of um, poetry, especially Sufi poetry, just because it happened to have been created by Sufi poets or mystic poets that existed in the Muslim-ruled subcontinent. So now they think that they can take credit for that, that this is Indian. Remember the last time when we talked about how the Indians were trying to claim that the very obviously Pakistani supermodel, Pakistani Canadian supermodel who very quietly left the scene while she was still at the peak, the one who was said to have set precedents for today's models, for especially diverse ethnic diversity in modeling. So remember how the Indians tried to say, oh, you see, her father was from Hyderabad in India, so basically she's ethnically Indian. And even then, as I said, we kind of proved how wrong they were, because in India, Hyderabadis, Gujaratis, yeah, sorry, but there's a good chunk of them that are not ethnically Indian. Kashmiris are not at all ethnically Indian. The whole of Pakistan are not basically ethnically Indian. Again, we're predominantly, we have the steppe Caucasian, we have these Aryan traits basically, and we're again predominantly Aryan. And then we have got Middle Eastern, we've got Turkish, we've got a bit of Dravidians, which are ethnically Indian. If you want pure ethnically Indian, um, race, go to the south of India. This is something I've said even before. So remember, after all of that, now what happened is, as we know, Pakistani songs are all the rage now. India, Bollywood, especially Bollywood, has till date, and this is just the songs that are on their record. Okay, these are not the songs that are still not touched upon. The songs that have been counted on the record now are more than 100, almost 200 Pakistani songs have been plagiarized, as in just outright plagiarized. At least 100 songs of them are 100% plagiarized. If you count more than 100, some people would try to use, oh, it was sampling, it was inspiration, call a theft by any other name, it is still a theft. Okay? So, yeah, without permission, taking singers of Pakistan's songs and literally plagiarizing them. And these are not just any songs. These are songs that are already very, very popular in their own right, that have already been very famous, and the Indians still plagiarized them. So we're already pretty sensitive on that topic, you see. And then, when you have these bloggers or reactors, or vocal coaches abroad, Americans, Europeans, whatever, when they fail to do their research, which I'm sorry to say we still have some of those, when they fail to do their research, despite the fact that, especially if they're reacting to Coke Studio songs, now the OG Coke Studio is Pakistan. The Coke Studio, Bangla and India are very new in the scene, and that is because these are franchises, okay? So the OG Coke Studio, which now we have to call Coke Studio Pakistan to avoid that confusion, is one of the most popular shows, or that is being reacted to all over the world. And obviously, because the whole point of Coke Studio was, reinventing, fusing, and leading back to our own roots and all. So there's been a lot of, especially Sufiana or mystical, songs that have been put in Coke Studio in many ways. Now, one of the most popular ones that, especially all over the world, people go crazy about is Amir Khusro's famous poetry, or famous kalam, Sufi kalam, or mystic poetry, um, which was performed actually many times in Coke Studio in various different genres, and it was performed even by strings, Faisal Kabadia and Bilal Maqsood. That song, we have to call it song for the want of a better word, really, although it's actually a devotional song. So, as I was saying, I'm sorry, but you know what? I was supposed to hit pause, but I hit end, and now I'm basically stringing on to next. Anyway, whatever. Point is, so Amir Khusro's Sufi kalam that was performed by Abda Parveen and Rahat Fateh Ali Khan was Chap Tilak. Okay. Now, Amir Khusro is not identified as an Indian poet, despite the fact that the Indians always like to think that that is how he's identified. But actually, he is oh, correctly identified as an Indo-Persian poet. Why? Because he may have been born in India, but he is not ethnically Indian. So all those Indians who are always trying to trace people and say, oh, they're ethnically Indian, that's why they're this. So here's one thing that goes against your whole thing, your whole logic, or whatever it is that you like to talk about. He is not ethnically Indian, never was. Okay. So yeah, he was basically of Persian origins and roots. And he mostly mostly wrote in Persian, so almost all his poetry is in Persian. And just to identify with the common people, he wrote a few poetry, or a few poems, you can say, a few mystic poetry. A few of them were written in local languages, one of them being Urdu, by the way, in Braj Bhasha. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is Chap Tilak, this particular poetry, Chap Tilak, this particular Sufi kalam, or basically Kafi. This is actually a Kafi, by the way. So the Chap Tilak Kafi was composed um, in the Braj Bhasha language. Okay, so the Braj Bhasha is actually very closer to Urdu than you would normally expect. And he just did that basically so that he could again identify with the common people. And it was a popular language in the north central India during his time, and it's still spoken in some regions today, by the way. So that is why he composed it in this language. Now it is a Sufi composition, right? And it is made in the Kafi style, right? And so it is performed basically in the Qawwali or the Qawl style. Yes, Qawwali was originally known as Qawl. Okay, so Qawwali, Indians cannot identify with Qawwali despite the fact that they are trying to. So what they're trying to do is that this particular performance, by the way, which has been officially categorized as the Qawwali genre, the Indians were basically having their arguments with the, in the comment section of that one of those bloggers and reactors reaction. Is that they were saying, oh, these are Pakistani singers, but this is an old ancient Indian poet, and it is performed in classic Indian music. No, it's not. First of all, he's not an old Indian poet, but if you want to talk about it, yeah, he belongs to Muslim India, because remember, there was no India, there was no Hindustan before the Muslims. India was never one single country. I don't know how many times I need to remind the world of that, but India was never one country. That is why we refer to it as a subcontinent, because it was many different warring states. Yes, these were states that were constantly at war with each other. And it was the Muslims who decided to unite them under their rule and make them Hindustan, one country. Okay, and it became the Golden Sparrow, as we know, which the British, just were dying to have a taste of, and they ended up looting and plundering. And again, once again, because they only the Muslims can be credited with uniting a huge um, subcontinent into one country. The British obviously failed miserably at that, and so when they left, in their wake, India basically broke back, you can say. And India should have broken into smaller pieces considering all of that, but I think India should be very lucky that it still managed to keep a huge chunk to itself, despite the fact that at least 5 states are illegally occupied till date. So, Pakistan, the whole two nation theory of India and Pakistan also, when proposed, it did not just explain how Muslims and Hindus were two separate nations, which is true in every aspect, but they also explained how historically this part that is now Pakistan was always ethnically also distinct from India, where we were never ethnically pure Indians, if you know what I mean. This part was the part that met a lot of genetic amalgamation, and not through wars, through trades, through travel. Yes, this part of the subcontinent, which is now Pakistan, especially this huge part, which is Punjab and Sindh, these two provinces especially, we can be still today directly traced back to the Indus civilization, in case you didn't know that. But this is the DNA, okay? In our DNA, you can directly still trace us to our Indus civilization ancestors. So we are direct descendants, one in one form or the other, especially those of us in Punjab and Sindh, as I said. Other than that, because even in those times, the people in the Indus civilization or people who were native to this land, they mixed with other ethnicities, they mixed with other tribes. Okay, so there was already this genetic fusion going on. Okay, so this is why the northern India is filled with an ethnically diverse, uh, how do we say, population. Okay, and as that's why I always say, if you really want to talk about pure ethnic Dravidian Indians, you would go to the south, and that's where you will have a good understanding of what an ethnic Indian looks like. So in the north of India, we have already been mixed. I mean, America has lived 100 years, and they still cannot boast that amount of mix, if you know what I mean. So if you look at us, we are already the result of a mixing and matching of all the races and all the various ethnicities possible in the world. Believe it or not, but it's a fact. So that there, removed on one side, Amir Khusro was known to have composed his poetry in Kaul, which is now Qawwali, Naqsh, uh, Gul, and Kafi, which is this particular composition was in Kafi. Okay, and so these are all Persian, Middle Eastern influences. These are all Islamically influenced forms of poetry. Okay, or forms of composition, music composition. So when what the Indians do not even understand, or maybe they haven't realized, historically speaking, he also influenced, and he had already fused the classical Indian music with Persian elements. So, your classic Indian music has already got the stamp of Persian influence in it, in case you didn't know that. Especially when it was, the works. Because remember, see, even in India, the why, strangely, despite the fact that they like to argue that we're Muslims and in Islam music is not in our culture, but in Hinduism it's a huge part of their culture, which is true. It is part of their religious culture. They sing and dance to their gods. We don't, obviously. No monotheist, sorry, no monotheistic religion ever allows singing and dancing to God, because God doesn't allow that and He doesn't like that, obviously. And that is why actually music is not encouraged in Islam. It's because of the pagan origins. You understand, the pagan religious rites that are attributed to it. But generally, music is not forbidden in Islam. Okay, again, it depends on what type of music it is, and it depends on what type of poetry it is. Okay, so in Islam, nothing is ever black and white, just out there, removed or banned. It has to have context. It has to have reason. So yes, generally, cultural music, for example, cultural music that has nothing to do with religious, pagan, especially pagan religious activities, it's accepted in Islam. For example, having music in weddings, like how we have the dole, and or some people, or in Arabian Peninsula they have the duff. So these are acceptable in Islam. By the way, in case you didn't know that, even singing and all in happiness is accepted. What is not accepted, as I said, are certain forms of music and certain forms of poetry that can either have pagan religious attributes, or they can have lust oriented attributes, or whatever. I mean, you get the gist. So yeah, despite all of that, you will notice that very strangely, Pakistan has always produced actual masters in music, and even in TV industry and all. Now, why? Why is that? I mean, India talks about gurus and this and that, but Pakistan actually has masters and grandmasters in some of the oldest musical forms of the subcontinent. Why? Number one, because as I said, even the music in the subcontinent, because remember, it was the Muslim ruled subcontinent, even the music was heavily influenced by Islam. Okay? The music was heavily influenced by Islam and by Muslims. In fact, Bollywood's origins is also that it was made, it was formed, it was created by Muslims. Um, yes, the Muslims of India, they are the ones who were behind the original Bollywood. And as you can see, there's still a huge, heavy influence, Islamic influence, one way or the other. Islamic, not Islamic, but Muslim Indians influence in Bollywood, despite the fact that there has been this huge tussle going on, which you can see in India, where they're trying to uh, take it away and try to sort of Hindufy Bollywood as much as they can. But originally, Bollywood was because it was created, it was founded, it was put together by Muslims. So your poets again were Muslims, your music directors were Muslims, your composers were Muslims, your lyricists were Muslims, songwriters, your singers were Muslims, or even if they were not Muslims, they had to learn Urdu because the songs were composed in Urdu, which is the language of the Muslims of India, which is obviously the language of the land of Pakistan, the national language of Pakistan. Why? Because we Muslims, we identify ourselves with Urdu, we identify ourselves with Pakistan, so Pakistan equals Urdu, right? Because of the simplicity and the popularity of Urdu language, it had to be integrated into India that had no national language actually of its own, and so they decided to call it Hindi, okay? Because they claim and then they justify their claims by saying that after all, the British used to call it Hindustani anyway. So, yeah, who cares? Anyway, point being that Urdu is the main theme of Bollywood, even until recently when they tried to Hindiize it, but they were not very successful because nobody could even understand it, not even in their own country. So there we are. So those legends migrated to Pakistan, including Muhammad Rafi, in case you didn't know. Noor Jahan, Muhammad Rafi, they migrated to Pakistan. Muhammad Rafi was convinced finally by the then Bollywood industry of India, which still had some Muslims there left too. He was convinced that he should go back and that they promised him that they would not allow his career to suffer in the process, and that he would still remain a legend and he would still be the best of the best and he would still get all his work and this and that, and that basically he would not suffer. So he refused initially, by the way. When they finally convinced him, then in the early 50s, yeah, early 50s, I think, he left. Okay, but Noor Jahan refused adamantly. She just refused. And in case you didn't know that, but any and every Indian and Pakistani would know that, Lata Mangeshkar was the she was not just a junior in status to Noor Jahan. In fact, you would say Lata Mangeshkar got her huge break because Noor Jahan left. That's another way of seeing it. Although, mind you, Lata Mangeshkar is amazing and a legend in her own right, but there is a point because this is something that even Lata herself would say that, I mean, to her, Noor Jahan is the ultimate guru. She's the ultimate maestro. She's the ultimate legend, you know, and nobody can be above her or even equal to her, not even Lata herself. These are Lata's own words. So Lata Mangeshkar, who grew to be a legend, still, I mean, till the end of her, time and career, she always gave um, a sort of an honorable mention to Noor Jahan every time, whenever she could find the opportunity to do so. So yeah, the greatest legends again, because they were Muslims again, so they migrated to Pakistan, and this is why Pakistan has, despite the fact that people say, oh, Muslims, they don't have music in their culture and this and that. Yeah, but you see, the people in the subcontinent um, who influenced music and art and architecture and um, basically everything, including films and story writing and literature. They were Muslims. Why? Because again, the Muslims, when they ruled the subcontinent, they influenced all these parts of the subcontinent. This is why, even the cuisines that you can see, which again, to, for a long time, India always tried to also lay claim to cuisines that were under, that were heavily Muslim influenced. And finally, they were taught, even by when the international chefs kept on making that mistake, and then finally they realized their sheer mistake of of calling Pakistani dishes Indian. So they also finally decided to set the record straight. Because, for example, in case you didn't know, biryani is known to have originated in Pakistan, despite the fact that actually historically, if you trace biryani, it again goes back to Persian roots. But even the Persians now are like, you know what, biryani is all it's all Pakistan. Why? Because if you look at the dish that was closely similar to biryani, it's not the same. If you know what I'm saying. So yes, uh, that is why people just concluded that, okay, you know what, biryani originated in Pakistan. So this is one Pakistani influenced dish that you can find very popular in India as well. And India thankfully cannot lay claim to that being their own. But India has tried to lay claim about Nihari, but again, the record was set straight. This too is a Pakistani influenced dish, again because it was in this region that is now Pakistan, and it is again heavily influenced by the Muslims. Any meat oriented dish is not native to India. It should be understood. Any meat oriented dish comes from the Mughals. It comes from the Muslim emperors of their times. So it has Turkish influence, it has Mughalai influence, it has um, Persian influence, it has Afghani influence too, by the way. But the largest of influences are Middle Eastern, Persian, and Turkish. Okay. It's like the kebabs. Now the Turks say, "Oh, kebabs began from Turkey," but you know what? There's only one kebab that you can say that, oh yeah, this originates from Turkey. That is the Sikh kebab. You know, the long kebabs that you put on the skewer kebabs. Yeah, but you see, in Pakistan we have at least five different types of kebabs, and none of them, apart from the skewer kebab, none of them originate from Turkey. So again, that shows why kebabs are also basically they are now generally rendered as Pakistani dishes. And again, these are Pakistani influenced dishes that you can find in India. Okay, um, there are, similarly, you have. I mean, similarly, you know what? Potatoes and tomatoes are not native to India. In case you didn't know that, they came from South America, especially potatoes. They came from South America, and I think it was the Portuguese that introduced tomatoes to India. And there are quite a number of spices too, despite the fact that India is known, or India as in the subcontinent, is known to be the land of spices. But guess what? Tea was introduced. It wasn't native to India. Tea was introduced, despite the fact that I guess you could argue that in the early times when the Muslims, again, as I said, when they put the whole subcontinent together, there was a time when Sri Lanka was part of the subcontinent, and it was, and tea is native to Sri Lanka. So you could argue that, yeah, tea was native to the subcontinent, but not in the British time, because by then, I think Sri Lanka was already separated. So yeah, so you could argue that the British introduced tea to the mainland, the subcontinent as we know now. Okay. Um, Similarly, again, if you talk about major influences in lifestyle, in cuisines, in culture, I'm sorry, but like it or not, you are heavily influenced by the Muslim rulers, and the Muslims, okay? Because, as I said, nobody takes the credit of unifying the subcontinent into one nation other than the Muslims. And the diversity that the Muslim rulers spread across the whole of the subcontinent is what we see today. That includes food, that includes music, that includes art, that includes culture, that includes um, anything and everything that you bring up. It includes literature. Some of our most important literature or some of our most famous literature were, again, it was always produced by Muslims, because they were the ones that produced literature, you know. So we don't mind India sharing that with us, so because we do believe that yes, we were all under, Muslim rule, as one subcontinent, one country, and fine. But when India tries to then twist that, and modify it and try to make it native Indian, nothing to do with the, because there were a few idiots who were actually literally arguing that, there is no Muslim influence. Now, as I said, the funny part that I've just proved is that Amir Khusro literally influenced the classical Indian music with Persian elements. You know. And this job tilak, which became this huge argument because they failed to do their research and they kept on and on raving and ranting about how awesome these singers were, and they kept on and on saying India. That rubbed everybody, the wrong way, especially the Muslims, the Pakistanis, not the Muslims, sorry, the Pakistanis, the wrong way. And and then you had these ignorant Indians trying to say, oh yeah, it is sung, they are Pakistani singers, but it was sung in the classic Indian. No, it's not. It was sung in the classic Kafi style. And you don't even know your own history. You didn't even know that your own Indian classical music is so heavily influenced by Persian Islamic elements that, I mean, that you don't even see that this is a Qawwali Kafi style. The poetry was composed in a Kafi style and it was performed in a Qawwali style. Okay, this is your classic Qawwali. And again, there are no grandmasters of Qawwali in India. It's all here because, again, it's the heavily Muslim influenced music. Why? Because it is solely to do with devotional songs, Sufi kalams. So you have the Grandmaster Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan and his brother, he was also a master. And then you have the nephew of Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, Rahat Ali Khan, who's now a new maestro after Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan's passed away. And then you have the queen of Qawwalis, which is Abda Praveen. So she's still alive and he is still way, way, way her junior, Rahat Fateh Ali Khan. So you have two Qawwalis, you have two Kabbals performing a Sufiana kalam. Why would you say they're performing it in the classical Indian music style? Can you see the contradiction here? Seriously, can anybody see the contradiction here? You're bringing in two Kabbals who are singing a Kafi style composed Sufiana kalam, and you're saying that this is the classical Indian music? Seriously? This is your classic Qawwali music. You have two Kabbals singing or performing a Qawwali. Thank you very much. You know, so the way the Indians keep on and on arguing, and what are they taking as references? Chatbot. Seriously? You know what? Google is free, and it's 1,000 times better than chatbot. You don't want to hit the history books? Please try Google. It's 1,000 times more accurate than your chatbot. I don't know if you have Siri for your chatbot. If you're having your own Indian made chatbot, I don't know. Okay. But if you have nothing else, then please go and watch the making, because the OG Coke Studio Pakistan, they have a habit of always uploading the behind the scenes, the making, the journey of each episode. Okay. And when you go there, you can actually see how they've categorized the genre. Okay. The genre is even categorized as Qawwali. So, in fact, India needs to stop trying to twist and change and modify history to its liking. We invented the zero, you know. We invented Nihari, we invented kebabs, we invented Sufyana Kalam. I mean, one day will come, they'll start saying that too. You just never know, you know. So, stick to the basics. Stick to the basics, please. What I can only say is we have to accept many things, like the fact that we are already the result of the constant amalgamation of all the races and ethnicities in this world. We are the result of various cultures, various fusions, various influences, the fact that Pakistan in its music industry is top notch is again because we do have all the maestros. I'm sorry to say, um, that's how it is because it was the Muslims that influenced all the culture at that time, and those Muslims migrated here to Pakistan. That's why we have the best of the best still, and that is why we still have all that talent in us, and that is why we produce all those songs that India gets to plagiarize. And they have even plagiarized our films, by the way, in case you never knew that. Till the early 90s, most of our very popular films were plagiarized by Bollywood. So there's that as well. And when India also tries to say that, oh, how is it that people don't talk about ancient India? In ancient India also we had these kind of hospitals and we had these kind of things. But you see, what you don't understand is when we talk about the medieval period and we talk about the Muslim scientists of those times, the doctors, the mathematicians, the the philosophers, the astronomers, the astrologers, the scholars, basically. When we talk about them, it's because the changes or the discoveries or the inventions or the modifications that they made, um, they are still heavily influencing us today. For example, algorithm. It was done by a Muslim. That algorithm is still being used today in social media. You understand? Algorithm was not produced in India, not even in ancient India. You see. Now, surgical instruments, the way surgery is done, lenses, camera, these are based on, again, inventions or discoveries or studies or formulas, or all by, again, those old medieval Muslim scientists. The fact that we still study them in order to make more progress in that very field, the fact that we still actually do most of the things that they invented in their time with few modification or sometimes no modification. That is what the world is talking about when they say that the Muslims have heavily influenced the modern world, the modern civilization, politically, legally, infrastructurally, when it comes to welfare, when it comes to trade, when it comes to um, you know education, when it comes to literature, when it comes to science and technology and math, and you know and astronomy and astrology. I mean, the reason why, and so, and medicine, the reason why, and chemistry, obviously chemistry. The original name of chemistry is alchemy. It's an Arabic word. The numbers we use are Arabic numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The way we write them, these are all Arabic numerals. You know, so yes, they have influenced us to this point that we're still using what they made. But whatever it is that ancient India had or did became so obsolete, you cannot even refer to them, is what we're saying. Okay, it has no influence in the modern world, is what we're saying. So, yes, we can claim many things to be native to Pakistan simply because many of us, despite the fact that there was a huge migration, obviously, on both sides, but you will still find that a lot of us belong to this, we are natives to this land, like the people of Punjab, the people of Sindh, the people of Balochistan, the people of Kashmir, the people of Gilgit Baltistan, the people of KPK, we are all natives to our own land. you know a huge number of immigrants, yes, did come from India, obviously, and a large number from here went there. But you know a very small part of Punjab is in India, but the majority part of Punjab is in Pakistan, so we are all still natives to our own land. So this is why we can claim ownership of the dishes we eat, of the clothes we wear. For example, shalwar kameez. Why is shalwar kameez a Pakistani dress? It's known as the Pakistani dress. It's known as the national dress of Pakistan. But look at again the popularity. The popularity of shalwar kameez is so much that even people in Nepal wear shalwar kameez. People in India wear shalwar kameez. People in Bangladesh wear shalwar kameez. People in Bhutan, even, you will find many people enjoying shalwar kameez. In the Middle East, you will find people enjoying shalwar kameez. Why? Because it is such a universal dress, and it's so comfortable, and it comes in so many makes and styles, and it can become completely westernized. It can become a fusion, and it's even within Pakistan. Every single one of us, we have our own distinct style of wearing the shalwar kameez, which you must have noticed. If you come to Punjab, it's a different way of wearing shalwar kameezes. If you go to Sindh, it's completely different. If you go to, in fact, in Sindh, they mostly wear khagras, like skirts and all. So if their men do wear shalwar kameez, you will see them in a completely different style. If you go up north, you will see shalwar kameez worn in a completely different style. And the fact that both men and women, we both wear shalwar kameezes, except that the colors and the cut and the design is what feminizes it, or makes it masculine. And that, you see, now if India suddenly claims ownership of the shalwar kameez, it's ridiculous, because it's not native to India. You know where it's native to? Us. This part, which is now Pakistan, which was once part of Muslim ruled India, the subcontinent, or the British India, you know. Yes. But again, we are the natives of this land, so we can claim ownership. For example, despite the fact that I've said that almost all the meat oriented dishes, in fact, all the meat oriented dishes cannot be called ethnically Indian, because, you know, they they were again Muslim influenced, right? But you know what? Again, this part of Pakistan, we have so many meat dishes that are native to this land. Again, why? Because ethnically, this was part of our cuisine. It's part of our culture again, because we are already, as you can see, linked to that part that of Central Asia or Iran, or which again makes our dishes very very similar to each other, even our native dishes. You see, and so we do have native dishes again that are completely vegetarian. For example, if you look at the absolute native local staple food of Punjab, then that is spinach, okay, mustard. Mustard is a leaf. So you have mustard spinach with um, corn flour bread, as in actual corn, as in maize, as in flour made of corn or maize, and then a dough made out of it, and then you make your flat bread, your roti out of it. That is your completely local staple Punjabi food that you will find in the villages, and even in the cities, people eat it with gusto. I mean, so yeah, I mean, if we claim ownership to our cuisines, for example, or to our music and all, it's because you can literally trace it. You can trace us to those ancestors. You can trace our cuisines through centuries, that one way or the other have been already one way or the other part of this part. Remember, this is the original Indus civilization, not that part of India. So if that part of India suddenly says, "Oh, we're the Indus civilization," no, you're not. You weren't. You know who were? We were, as I said. But through our DNA, you can even directly connect us to the ancestors. So, point being, it's okay to say that, oh yeah, this is part of the subcontinent culture and this and that, but to completely negate where the influences trickled from or came gushing from, you know that is wrong. To try to say that no, ethnically it's Indian, is wrong, because first of all, as I just proved to you, we're not all ethnically Indians, not in that way anyway. Many of us are already a completely new uh, form of ethnicity, because we've been mixed so much by so many races and ethnicities already, you know. So this is in fact a very stupid thing anyway, to try to trace yourself to your ethnic roots and try to stake some sort of a claim on that. We're all human beings, and like it or not, you know who we all come from? We come from Adam. We literally, all of us, are related, because we, all of us, come from Adam. Now take that in your pipe and smoke it. While this is me signing out, And I swear I am not going to do a third upload of this podcast if something happens to this mic. I'm using a different mic on a different device. So this is me signing out. Khuda Hafiz.